Hello everybody, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we're taking a look at the 2024 Senate election in the state of Montana, and I'll be detailing why this race has gotten so bad for Democrats, what is expected from this state, filling you in on what you've missed throughout the course of the past few months, and why this matters, why the Senate could come down to Montana, and why that could be bad news for the Democratic Party. So just for some context here, yesterday we got a poll from RMG Research. This is a nonpartisan poll. It's a good one. I like RMG. It's run by Scott Rasmussen, who actually I think originally led Rasmussen Reports, but as Rasmussen Reports became a lot more partisan in favor of the Republicans, Scott Rasmussen created another poll called RMG, and they do good work. I'm a big fan of RMG. They yesterday had Tim Sheehy up 50% to 43%. It's not close. She's already at 50%. Democrats losing the Senate seat by 7 points. Now, the silver lining for them is that Kamala Harris is down by 21 here, and that's not really the result we're expecting. It's likely that she'll lose the state, but I think by close to 16 or 17 instead of 21. If she loses it by more than 20, she'd be doing worse than Hillary Clinton in 2016, which to me is not likely. So you could argue that maybe the poll is a couple points too bullish on Republicans, but that doesn't change the fact that he's at 50%. He's leading Tester by a margin, twice the size of the margin of error, really. So, or, almost twice the size of the margin of error. So, this is bad news for Democrats, and we have to look at the history here. Democrats have for a very long time benefited from being able to win Senate seats in rural Republican states. If you I'm being earnest when I say this, right? Like, go look at a Senate map from the 2000s, even the early 2010s. You will see Democrats held seats. They held both seats in West Virginia. They held seats in North Dakota. They held seats in South Dakota. They held a seat in Nebraska. They held a seat in Indiana. And they held a seat in Missouri. And in 2018, Democrats did really well. Again, if you look at the House, they won 235 House seats. And this was a good year for them, right? 2018 was not a year where they got wiped out across the board. But if you look at the Senate and you look at the map, Democrats lost a number of Senate seats that they'd held prior, and these were in states that were deep red. Indiana, incumbent Joe Donnelly lost. In Missouri, incumbent Claire McCaskill lost. And in North Dakota, incumbent Heidi Heitkamp lost. And it wasn't because these senators were super hated. They became, more disliked as the electorates became more Republican in their states. But the reason that they lost was because Donald Trump came in, he campaigned for these Republicans, and these states are deeply red. Democrats just don't win these states anymore, no matter if they have an incumbent or if, maybe there's a local factor, right? It doesn't matter. These states flipped red, and these states are going to stay red for a very long time. Democrats are not going to be able to compete in these Senate seats for decades to come. So that's a problem for them because it makes the math harder for them to win the Senate. Like, even winning one random seat in a red state, if you're a Democrat, makes it so much easier to get to 50 or 51 seats in the chamber. The same goes for the Republicans. The Republicans are hugely, benefiting from the fact that Susan Collins is a Republican in a pretty Democratic-leaning state in Maine, right? So this is all to say, in recent years, we've seen partisanship really catch up to Democratic incumbents, and they don't win rural states anymore. And in 2018, the last hurrah of those Democrats, Jon Tester in Montana, Sherrod Brown in Ohio, and Joe Manchin in West Virginia. Joe Manchin already called it quits. He's not running for re-election. He won by 3 points, and he would have likely lost by 15 or 20, if not more, had he run for re-election in 2024. So he's not even in this race. This race is basically an automatic flip for the Republicans. Now, Ohio is a toss-up at the moment. I think we'll talk more about this later. But Sherrod Brown looks like he's, going to be in for a very tough battle for re-election here. But Montana is getting difficult for Democrats, and it's redder than Ohio by 7-8 points. It's more rural. It's a smaller state in terms of the electorate, right? And so Jon Tester now is in an increasingly difficult position, as we see from the RMG poll we got yesterday. And this is, kind of reflected by all the recent polling data. RMG had him down by 7. He was down by 6 in Fabrizio and Ward. A GOP-aligned poll had him down by 7, but that's still not good. And then, since the previous poll had Tester up by 5, but that was from RMG in August. So the recent polls have all shown a pretty clear lead for Tim Sheehy. And, just to kind of talk about why this is happening, right? Like, Jon Tester is a popular incumbent. In 2023, only last year, he had one of the highest approval ratings of any senators, across the country. So Montanans do like Jon Tester, and keep in mind, he's won 3 Senate elections here. He's 3-0 all time when he runs for Senate in Montana, right? Like, he didn't get lucky once. This guy's been in Montana politics for a very long time, and he's a very good politician. He knows how to win these races. The problem for him, though, is that, as I mentioned, polarization catches up to you. In the Donald Trump era, we have a lot of Republicans who are not willing to vote for Democrats up and down the ballot the way they used to, right? But broadly, Democrats, especially in these red states, have struggled to actually distance themselves from the top of the ticket, right? Like, Kamala Harris will not win Montana. Maybe she'll surprise Democrats and only lose by 12 or 13 instead of 16 or 17, right? But she doesn't have a chance to win this, and we know this. The problem for Democrats here, again, is that all Republicans have to do is tie them to Biden, tie them to Harris, and say, look, a vote for Jon Tester is a vote for Democratic control of Washington. It's a vote for Kamala Harris. It's a vote for Joe Biden, right? And logically, if you're a Republican and you believe that, there's no reason to vote for Jon Tester, right? Like, if you fully intend on voting for Donald Trump, if you want a Republican majority in Congress, or at the very least, if you think Kamala Harris is going to win, if you want to check on Harris, why would you vote for a Democrat, in the Senate, right? Like, this is a federal election, and that is a political thought process that has been relevant in recent years, because it's the reason why we see Republicans don't really want to vote for Democrats in the Senate the same way Democrats don't really want to vote for Republicans in the Senate. It's the same reason why Larry Hogan, I think, is going to lose in Maryland. Voting for Senate is a federal thing and has implications at the national level. And so Republicans aren't going to see a reason to vote for Tester because of that. And if you watch GOP attack ads in this state where the Republicans are buying tons of attack ads, and they really ramped up their campaign in recent weeks, they're saying, look, a vote for Jon Tester, vote for Democrat, right? Jon Tester votes with Joe Biden X% of the time, right? Jon Tester's too liberal for Montana. You see these attacks, and they resonate because Montana is a Republican state. So that's the problem the Democrats have. Fundamentally, they need to convince 15, 20% of Trump voters to vote for Jon Tester. And unless that happens, there's no path because Montana is a red state. And so in 2018, what we saw was that the electorate was a bit blue, which I'll be getting into in a second, but also that a number of Republicans were still able to come home and come out and vote for Jon Tester. And so this year, we don't see that in the polls. Now, the big problem, and I think we kind of know it's because of the ads, because in the poll, even from last month, about a month and a half ago, Tester was up by 5 in this same poll. He's now down by 7. So you've just seen a 12-point shift in a month, which is crazy. And that's, again, mostly because as Republicans have, ramped up their attacks, they've made the race more polarizing. It's kind of come closer to reality, I'd say, where maybe in theory people wouldn't have minded voting for Tester in the abstract, but then the election comes and they're like, wait a minute, I don't want to vote for a Democrat. And so that's kind of what happens. And we see similar things all the time in past Senate races where you've had maybe a popular person running for the party that usually loses the state, and early on they're doing fine, but then polarization sets in, the attacks set in, voters think more about the ramifications of their decision. They usually come home to vote for the party that they affiliate with presidentially. And so that's why I think Tester's going to lose. We also have to consider the nature of the 2018 election in Montana. This was a race that Tester won by around 18,000 votes, and that's a small margin. But Tester was helped by the fact that this was a midterm, first of all, so he didn't have like a huge Trumpian turnout like the one you're going to get in November in Montana. And you also didn't have the impact of a top-of-ticket race. Jon Tester got to run as the number one candidate in Montana, or Tester and Rosendale ran as at the tops of their tickets, right? If I said that right, hopefully. In Montana in 2018, because it was a midterm. This year, Jon Tester is not at the top of the ticket for the Democrats in Montana. It's Kamala Harris. And Donald Trump is at the top of the ticket for Republicans. And we all know how that matchup's going to go. So obviously you're going to have a Republican turnout. You're also going to have people who are going to vote Republican down the ballot because Trump's running, because Trump's at the top of the ticket. And we also have to consider that in 2018, Democrats, this is an interesting fact, Democrats only lost that House seat by 8 points in 2018 in Montana. So Tester outran the House Democrat by 11, which is a good overperformance, right? Like an 11-point ticket split is impressive. But if Tester outruns Harris by 11, he'll probably still lose by 4 or 5. And that's generous, by the way, because generally ticket splits tend to erode over time, right? Like if you look at how Joe Manchin has done over time, in 2012, he outran Barack Obama by, I think, I don't know, 65 points. And in 2018, he outran Hillary Clinton by, I think, 40 points, which is still a huge, but a 24-point swing. And then this year, if he ran, he would have outran Harris by maybe 15 or 20 or 25, which is still good, but over time, fewer and fewer people will split their ticket. And so that we see the same thing happening in Montana. And this is like the long way of me, because we're doing, more analysis this video. This is the long route to what I'm getting at, which is that there's really not a path for Tester here. He's the incumbent. He's won multiple times before, but when you factor in the fact that we're going to get turnout from Republicans who didn't vote in 2018, when you consider the dynamic of split ticket voting, eroding over time, when you consider that Tester, even if you think his ticket split is going to stay the same from 2018, which I don't think will happen, I think it'll be less. But even if you take that 11-point ticket split, he's still down by maybe 3, 4, 5 points. And then we also have to consider, really the final part of this, which is that Republicans actually have a good candidate here. Tim Sheehy has really avoided the classic GOP trap in recent years of getting into hot water. And we see this even looking at the Senate map now, right? Carrie Lake in Arizona, who's running for this seat 6 years later. I'm looking at I can pull up that right now, actually. But, in Arizona, Carrie Lake's running for this seat. I think she is, almost single-handedly cost herself that seat because of her claims about, how she didn't lose the governor's election, her claims for the 2020 election, which, really hurt her in a state like Arizona. In Wisconsin, Eric Hoffman, I think, isn't that great of a candidate for Republicans, just based on his lack of political experience and his, I think, record of saying things in the past that are going to hurt him, right? In Michigan, Republicans, I think, have actually running a decent candidate there, and Mike Rogers, who's he's kind of been fine avoiding controversy. And then obviously in Pennsylvania, I think Dave McCormick is a fine candidate, and he's really raising a lot of money there, which is good for Republicans. But the Democratic playbook is going to be that he's a hedge fund manager from Connecticut, and that's not going to play well in Scranton or in Westmoreland County outside of Pittsburgh, right? So Republicans have have a slew of bad candidates this year, and it was worse in 2022 when they ran Dr. Oz, Herschel Walker, and Blake Masters and J.D. Vance, all of whom significantly underperformed fundamentals. And J.D. Vance was the only one of those 4 people to win, and he did worse than Trump in Ohio. So obviously, the problem Republicans have had is that they can't find good candidates. Tim Sheehy doesn't really have any glaring issues. Democrats have pointed out that he's made comments in the past that are problematic about, I think, the Native American community within Montana, which is relevant. Montana is a state with significant Native American reservations, but we haven't actually seen Democrats go after Sheehy for this in Montana. We've seen it, kind of some concern about it online. It'll be interesting to see if the Tester campaign makes this an issue. I'm not sure it will, but we'll see. But so far, and again, it's possible that there's Oppo research, because I don't work for Democrats or Jon Tester, right? As far as I know, there could be research that that it could crush Tim Sheehy's campaign. But obviously, until that comes out, we can't predict it happening. So more likely than not, Sheehy's ran a fine campaign. He's doing all he needs to lead in the polls, and he hasn't really had a scandal that Democrats have actually been able to make a real variable in this race. So for that reason, I think it's pretty clear that Montana's leaning towards him. It's not game over, but to me, it is pretty close, especially given the recent polling we have, and I suspect polling in the future is going to corroborate this and show Tester down. And this isn't his fault. I don't think he's run a bad campaign. I just think that in a state like Montana, if you're a Democrat, it doesn't matter how popular you've been or how long you've been in that office. It's 2024, presidential year. Donald Trump's on the ballot. He's going to win the state by 16 points, right? At a certain point, it gets really difficult to win. And so if Democrats lose Montana, they're really in trouble here, because they have to, just to kind of look at this, right? I think they're favored in Arizona, they're favored in Nevada, they're favored in Michigan. They're still favored in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, but those races are getting a bit closer. And then, these final 4 states, these are all pretty Republican states, right? Like Nebraska, I've left blank, but that's only because there's an independent candidate running who's been doing okay in the polls. But like I said with Montana earlier, usually polarization sets in and people gravitate towards the party that they support. Otherwise, the Republicans are probably going to win this race. And then they just need, to get an outright majority, they just need 1 of 2 of these 3 states, which are all Trump states from 2020, and will vote for Trump this year in all likelihood. So Florida and Texas, they have 2 incumbents there, and that's the ballgame. It doesn't matter if Democrats can pull it out in Ohio, because Florida and Texas, you know, that's if Republicans win that's all there is to it. So Democrats would need, on top of Ohio, they need to win Texas, which is I think more likely than Florida. Which it's possible they win Texas, but it's not likely. You can't bet on it. And they've led in one poll here, and they've been down in the other ones. So without Montana, it's really hard for Democrats to win the Senate, because if Tester were to pull off a miracle and win by 600 votes in Montana, then Democrats could lose Texas and still hold on to the Senate as long as Sherrod Brown won in Ohio, which is, I would say, still possible. It's getting harder, but Sherrod Brown definitely can still win. And so that's why this seat is so important. And it kind of, if Republicans win it, it makes them, I'd say, 92% chance to win the Senate here, right? And so that's why Democrats were hoping earlier on this year that Tester was going to maintain his favorable rating and maintain his polling lead. As the ads have set in, as polarization has set in, that hasn't happened. So again, those are my thoughts in this race. I promise I keep you all updated on the individual races. I'll be doing more of that in the coming weeks as we get closer to the election. So subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Like this video. Let me know what you think. Comment down suggestions if there's a race you want to see. Tell me what you are looking for, and I'll see you all in the next one.